Notre Dame 23, Georgia 10. Yeah, there were some emotional moments down on the field in the last 5 minutes of the game among the assembled media, the people that covered Notre Dame. Uh, Notre Dame's 13-1. That's a big deal, and for those of us who've been covering Notre Dame for a long time, this was a huge, huge victory. There's no doubt about that. Because the Irish are headed to Miami. They're in the Final Four of the college football playoff for Fighting Irish Preview and FightingIrishPreview.com. I'm Phil Houck, and this is That's a Wrap, brought to you by Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. Remember, where you bank does matter. Well, pregame, we talked about a couple of keys, and I'm going to talk about, well, I'm not going to tell you how great I am, but a couple of them came true, and there's no doubt about that. First of all, we talked about turnovers, how Notre Dame was plus 16 in the turnover department. Georgia was plus 1, and then in a close game, that's going to make a big difference. Well, guess what? Notre Dame they're now plus, what are they, plus 18 because they got 2 tonight, and Georgia got 0, and that made a huge difference, particularly the second turnover that the Irish picked up right at the end of the first half. The score is 6-3 at that point. The Irish are, it's a rock fight, as we talked about. We also talked about the probability that this would be like a 15-round heavyweight match, and it was. But anyway, they picked up a turnover. Actually R.J. Oben, Roman's his dad, but R.J. Oben, who was the fifth-year transfer from Wake Forest, came over actually with Riley Leonard, has been really quiet all year long, but he makes a great play, punches the ball out of Gunnar Stockton's arms, and the Irish recover the ball at the 13-yard line, and on the next play, they score, and just before halftime, instead of 6-3, it's 13-3, and that's big, and it was big because we knew that Notre Dame was going to receive the second half kickoff. Okay. Well, what did we say before the game? We said, you know who really owes Notre Dame? It's Jaden Harrison, who came in as a grad transfer this year, as one of the top kick return specialists in the country. Well, we've been waiting all season long. So I said, how about a kickoff return from Jaden Harrison? Wouldn't that be nice? And I'm being honest now, and people can confirm it. At halftime, talking to some of my colleagues, I said, they're receiving the kick. Let's go, Jaden Harrison. It's time for him to return a kickoff. Well, 98 yards later, Jaden Harrison was in the end zone with the longest kick return in college football playoff history, 98 yards. And the Irish suddenly are up 20-3, and the Irish never looked back really at that point. The defense stepped up considerably. I mean, Georgia was game. They were playing hard. They were making plays, and Gunnar Stockton had a pretty good night passing the ball. But Georgia, or I should say Notre Dame, stopped the running game. Georgia went 0 for 5 on third down in the second half, and they went 0 for 3 on fourth down. So consider when you go 0 for 3 on fourth down, that's almost like a turnover if you think about it when you stop a fourth down play. Another big benefit for the Irish here is that Mitch Jeter kicked 3 field goals, and they're all in the 45, 47, 48-yard range. That's big. His confidence now has got to be back, and that's critical as the Irish advance in the college football playoffs. So really, after the Irish went up 20-3, their only score after that was one more field goal because the final was 23-10. Did give up a Georgia touchdown in that second half, and the Irish are 13-1, the most wins in their whole history. Of course, college teams play more games now. So it's Penn State in 7 days in Miami. Penn State is 13-2. Their only losses came to highly regarded Oregon. In fact, until yesterday when Oregon lost, they were considered the number 1 team in the country. And of course, the other loss that Penn State suffered came at the hands of Ohio State, who's lurking on the other side of the bracket and is probably the favorite right now to win this whole tournament. And so far in the CFP, the route for Penn State is that in their first round game, they took out SMU, a highly regarded team. And then on New Year's Eve, 2 days ago, we'll talk about that in a second, they took out Boise State 31-14. So Penn State's on a roll right now, and they're going to have more time to prepare than the Irish. Think about that. Now that's big because the Irish saw some, some obviously a very physical game. There's concerns now about Jeremiah Love. We don't know much about him. I did see him jumping around, celebrating after the game. Howard Cross went back into the game, but I know he's going to be gimpy as well. Anyway, that kickoff next week in Miami in the Orange Bowl is next Friday night at 6:30. Coverage will be on ESPN. So, I wanted to mention a post-game comment from Riley Leonard. He said Riley Leonard is just great in press conferences, and we could write just a little book about the things he says. But the thing he said today, he said this team's superpower is in its preparation. And to illustrate that point, he pointed out that the Irish, with the tragedy yesterday, got an extra day to prepare. Well, and actually, a lot of kind words, heartfelt words were said about the people of New Orleans and about the tragedy by Marcus Freeman post-game and those things, as well as Riley Leonard and Xavier Watts in the press conference I was in. But Riley Leonard then took the opportunity yesterday, after the team had done a little walkthrough and did some other things yesterday, and he went to his offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, and says, let's go watch some film. He says, I got in 4 more hours of film study. Superpower preparation. He said, we got 1 more day to prepare. Let's take advantage of it. So remember, pray for New Orleans, pray for peace. The final score from the Sugar Bowl tonight, Notre Dame 23, Georgia 10. The Irish move on, and Georgia goes home. And for Fighting Irish Preview and FightingIrishPreview.com, I'm Phil Houck, and this has been That's a Wrap, brought to you by Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. Go Irish!